Cool. Thanks.
Hold your hands on to your chest and tell me what you find. Put your skin onto my skin, and we won't be alone. Don't forget who you are, even though you're in need. Like a bird in the night, your emotions deserves to be free. You can cry, drink in your eyes. Do you miss the sadness when it's gone? And you let the river run wild. And you let the river run wild. You can cry, drink in your eyes. I don't miss the sadness when it's gone. And the feeling of it makes me smile. As I let the river run wild. You can cry, you can cry. To where the ocean is big, become a part of the river. You can cry, you can cry, you can cry. Can you let the river run wild? You can cry, drink in your eyes. Do you miss the sadness when it's gone? And you let the river run wild. And you let the river run wild. You can cry, drink in your eyes. I don't miss the sadness when it's gone. And the feeling of it makes me smile. As I let the river run. This will be an everlasting love. This will be the one I've waited for. This will be the first time anyone has loved me. I'm so glad he found me in time, and I'm so glad that he rectified my mind. This will be an everlasting love for me. Loving you is so kind of wonderful because you've shown me just how much you care. You've given me the thrill of a lifetime and made me believe you've got more thrills to spare. Oh, this will be an everlasting love. Oh, yes, it will now. You brought a lot of sunshine.
Well,
into
you can go up to the
my
podium.
life. You filled me with happiness I never knew. You gave me more joy than I ever dreamed of. And no one can take the place of you. Well, this will be you and me. Yes, sorry, eternally. Hugging and squeezing and kissing and pleasing together forever, forever, whatever. Yeah, 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 yeah. You and me. So long as I'm living true love, I'll be giving to you. I'll be serving 'cause you're so deserving. Hey, you're so deserving. You're so deserving. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, love, 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 love.
Hello? So I'm coming through. See?
From now on,
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Yeah. Check 1 2. I can boost. Check 1 2.
You're stuck in my head, stuck in my heart, stuck in my body. I wanna go, get out of here. I'm sick of the party. I'd run away with you. Ooh. This is the part you gotta say all that you're feeling. Picking a bag, leaving tonight while everyone's sleeping. Let's run away. I'd run away with you. Ooh. 'Cause you make me feel like I could be driving you all night, and I'll find your lips in the streetlights. I wanna be there with you. Baby, take me to the feeling. I'll be your sinner in secret. When the lights go out, run away with me, baby. Every single minute, I'll be your hero and win it. When the lights go out, run away with me, Up in the clouds, high as a kite, over the city. We never sleep, we never try. When you are with me, I wanna stay with you. Ooh, 'cause you make me feel like I could be driving you all night, and I'll find your lips in the streetlights, and I wanna be there with you. Oh baby, take me to the feeling. I'll be your sinner in secret. When the lights go out, run away with me, Oh baby, every single minute, I'll be your hero and win it.
1 2.
When the lights go out, run away with me, hold on to me, I never wanna let you go. Run away with me, over the weekend, we could turn the world to gold. Over the weekend, we could turn the world to gold. Oh, my baby, take me to the feeling. Take me to where you're sitting in secret. Oh, when the lights go out, run away with me. Just run away with me, baby. Every single minute, I'll be your hero and win it. When the lights go out, run away with me, run away with me. Run away with me, run away with me. Run away with me, run away with me.
Hey, I was doing just fine before I met you. I drink too much and that's an issue, but I'm okay. Hey, you tell your friends it was not nice to meet them, but I hope I never see them again. I know it breaks your heart. Moved to the city in a broke down car, and 4 years no calls. Now you're looking pretty in a hotel bar, and I can't stop. No, I can't stop. So baby, pull me closer in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford. Bite that tattoo on your shoulder. Pull the sheets right off the corner of the mattress that you stole from your roommate back in Boulder. We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older.
You look as good as the day I met you. I forget just why I left you. I was insane. Stay and play that Blink 182 song that we beat to death in Tucson. Okay. I know it breaks your heart. Moved to the city in a broke down car, and 4 years no call. Now I'm looking pretty in a hotel bar, and I can't stop. No, I can't stop.
So baby, pull me closer in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford. Bite that tattoo on your shoulder. Pull the sheets right off the corner of the mattress that you stole from your roommate back in Boulder. We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older. So baby, pull me closer in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford. Bite that tattoo on your shoulder. Pull the sheets right off the corner of that mattress that you stole from your roommate back in Boulder. We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older.
We ain't never getting older.
We ain't never getting older.
We ain't never getting older. We ain't never getting older. No, we ain't never getting older.
We ain't never getting older.
No, we ain't
Never getting older. Shine on, diamond. Don't make me wait another day. 'Cause passion is passion. You know it just as well as me. Now let's stop running from love, running from love. Let's stop, my baby. Let's stop running from us, running from us. Let's stop, my baby. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Spark up, buzz cut. I've got my tongue between your teeth. Go slow, no, no, go fast. You like it just as much as me. Now let's stop running from love, running from love. Let's stop, my baby. Let's stop running from us, running from us. Let's stop, my baby. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you now. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move, your every move. Oh my, my, my. My, my, my. Should be the last night ever. Should be the last night where I got my name on this treasure, on this treasure. Oh my, my, my. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. I die, yeah, yeah. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Living for, yeah. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Oh my, my, my. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Living for your every move. Oh my, my, my.
Every butterfly I get belongs to you. You don't believe me, but it's true. Show the freckles on my arm, spell out your name. Real feelings coming through. 'Cause all I know and all I am is you. Ooh, yeah, all I know and all I am is you. Ooh, I'm breaking my silence, 'cause I've had a few. I just can't deny it.
I'll tell you about the magic and to free your soul, but it's like trying to tell a stranger about a rock and roll. If you believe in magic, don't bother to choose if it's jug band music or rhythm and blues. Just go and listen. It'll start with a smile that won't wipe off your face, no matter how hard you try. Your feet start tapping and you can't seem to find how you got there. So just blow your mind. If you believe in magic, come along with me. We'll dance until morning till there's just you and me. And maybe, if the music is right, I'll meet you tomorrow, so late at night. And we'll go dancing, baby, then you'll see how the magic's in the music and the music's in me. Yeah. Do you believe in magic? Yeah, believe in the magic of a young girl's soul. Believe in the magic of a rock and roll. Believe in the magic that can set you free. Oh, I'm talking about the magic. Like I do believe in magic. Like I do believe. Like I do believe in magic. You feel like summertime. You took this heart of mine. You'll be my Valentine in the summer. In the summer. You are my only one. Just dancing, having fun. Out in the shining sun of the summer, of the summer. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. I love you. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. But no one else above you. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. I need you. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. Oh. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. I love you. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do. But no one else above you. Do love me, do love me, do. Oh. Do love me, do. I need you. Do love me, do love me, do. Do love me, do love me, do. Is it summertime magic that makes me wanna dance all night?
Well, good morning, good evening, or in this case, good afternoon. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Boston, and this is the Back2BU and Back2BU welcome virtual meeting. So I welcome you to the meeting. We have one more scheduled for this evening, and during that program, we will have some representatives from Wheelock College, Hospitality Administration, and also from the College of Fine Arts. Right now, this is more of a general meeting. We will have an opportunity momentarily to have a panel of folks from around the university who will be able to answer questions as we receive them in the Q&A. And I would recommend that you put your questions in the question and answer portion of this Zoom, and we will do our best. I'll do my best to try and consolidate them, get to them as best as we can within the hour. We will also have some folks representing financial aid, student activities, residence life, disability and access services, as well as the community service center, also in the Q&A, hopefully answering some questions perhaps more directly to you. So fish through that Q&A, either to put a question in or to take a look. That will be an important piece. And before I begin too, let me also thank student government for their role in working with us to put this together. We'll hear from a representative from student government, David Joseph, at the end of the hour. So the first thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about the commitments that we have for reopening and the expectations that we'll have for those of us who will be here teaching, learning, and participating in the activities and programs that we will offer at the university come a few short weeks in the fall. As I said, the university's made a commitment, and commitments designed to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And also support the well-being of this community, as well as individuals, you, me, and our faculty and staff. The commitments range from regular COVID testing that you'll hear more about, limiting the density of people here in spaces on campus and in buildings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And this is a commitment that not only the university makes, but people in the university community make. Our faculty, our TAs, our staff also make these commitments that we want to make sure that we keep you safe and that we keep ourselves safe as well. As a student who will be living, working, and attending classes on campus this fall, you'll also have a critical role to play along with all of us in minimizing the transmission of COVID-19 within the university community. So the university is requiring that you also make some health commitments for the safety of the community too. And let me talk to you a little bit about those. And I'll do that in a moment, but I first want to point out too, and it's important that I point this out, that if at any point you're unable to meet these commitments, we hope that what you will do is to remain off campus and complete your semester remotely. We urge you to do that and hope you'll make that commitment. And I think that's a matter of respect for each other if we do that. If you don't take this step yourself, the university will prohibit you from participating in any in-person campus activities, including classes and living here. So important to remember, make the decisions for yourself about whether or not you can live up to these commitments. And if you can't, go remote and we will understand. Here are the expectations that the university has for you. We want to make sure that you follow all university health requirements that include wearing face coverings, physical distancing, and hand washing and sanitizing. The university will expect that you complete a symptom attestation each day, every single day, and you'll hear more about that. You complete that every day prior to going to campus, or if you are a resident on campus living in student housing, before you leave your room. And if you report positive symptoms, you'll be expected to respond to the BU medical professional who will contact you for follow-up, including following any instructions about regular testing for COVID-19. So someone will follow up with you. We want to make sure that you are in contact with them and you respond to them. That makes the assumption too that one of the expectations is that we have contact information for you and that we can get in contact with you. Now, if you're required to undergo testing as a result of reporting any positive symptoms, if that's the case, you'll be expected to remain where you live and to minimize contact with others until a negative test result is obtained. We expect that you will schedule testing and report to an on-campus BU testing site for asymptomatic surveillance testing. Again, something you'll hear about a little bit momentarily. And that asymptomatic surveillance testing is based on an assigned test frequency that you will receive for yourself. If you are informed by BU medical professional or by your own primary care provider that you have a positive result from symptomatic or asymptomatic testing, and you live off campus, you'll be expected to isolate where you live. If you live in on-campus housing, you'll be moved to isolation housing and you'll isolate there. And in order to leave isolation and return to campus, to return to the activities, classes, programs, you must be fever-free and symptom-free for 72 hours without medication. And 10 days must have elapsed from the onset of those symptoms. Now, if the university determines that you are a close contact of another individual in the university community who tested positive, you'll be expected to follow the university's directive to quarantine for 14 days. If you live in on-campus housing, you'll be moved to quarantine housing and will quarantine there. And if you live off campus, you'll be expected to quarantine at the place where you live. Please all, and I'm going to say with all of these sorts of things that you'll hear, understand that these are all based on public health circumstances, and university guidance and protocols will likely change. And I found out with COVID, it's almost sure that there'll be some changes, sometimes rather abruptly. And we hope that what you'll do is to keep informed and follow along with any new guidance we might give you in the process. All right, so those are some basic things. We'll cover many of those, and we'll also give you a chance to ask some clarifying questions about those. So right now, what I'd like to do is to bring in some people who are going to be primarily here to answer your questions, and let's start to get them into the space. This is Sue Kennedy. Sue, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Sue Kennedy. I'm the Interim Associate Provost for Graduate Affairs. Work with all the schools and colleges to think about undergraduate academic programs.
Amanda, how about you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Amanda Connolly. I'm the Associate Director for Student Services in the International Students and Scholars Office, and I will do my best with our complicated international student questions today.
Okay. Peter, I see you there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Peter Smokowski. I'm responsible for housing and dining, our physical education, recreation, and dance programs, and a number of other units that serve students, faculty, and staff.
Thank you. And Dr. Platt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Judy Platt, and I oversee student health services here at BU.
Okay, let's get right at it. There are a few questions that came in right away. Of course, they are about, I think, the connections between quarantining and moving in. Let me give you an example. I'm scheduled to move in on the 22nd of August, but my roommate's coming on the 31st. I'll already be tested and settled by then. So will my roommate be tested before we are living with each other, or how will that work? And I think that's the quintessential part of the question. As it comes to quarantining and moving in, how's that going to work? And I think I've got to look to Dr. Platt and Peter Smokowski to answer that question.
So I think it might be helpful to talk about the move-in process and then discuss how quarantine and testing will occur from there. So in terms of move-in, and Peter can speak a little bit more about how we've de-densified that process, but upon move-in to the residential campus, students will have entrance testing. And the turnaround time that we anticipate for that entrance testing is around 24 hours. So we should be able to have results back in fairly quick time so that we are able to move students into isolation housing if they are here as part of the residential campus. In terms of quarantine, which is another topic that's related to move-in, there are varying degrees of quarantine that people I think are familiar with. There's two main ways that people find themselves in a situation where they may need to quarantine. The first is if you are identified as a close contact of someone who has tested positive, and Dean Elmore addressed that, that we'll need people who are identified as close contacts who are living in the residential campus to move to designated quarantine spaces and to reside there until their quarantine time is completed. There's also travel-related quarantine, and travel-related quarantine really speaks to a theoretical risk of exposure, not a known risk of exposure like the close contact quarantine, but a theoretical risk of exposure based on where people are traveling from. And again, this is purely done by really lumping states and lumping countries all into one group. We know that individual health practices certainly can largely determine what risk someone may have for having COVID. But generally speaking, travel-related quarantine is required for is recommended, for anyone traveling internationally and anyone traveling to Massachusetts who is coming from outside of the New England corridor of states, and including New York and New Jersey. And so what the state says is that self-quarantine really means separating yourself from others as much as possible and only leaving your residence or your room to pick up food, to go to medical appointments, or to get testing as needed. So we're going to encourage the same thing for students here as they move in. For students who are coming from those areas that a self-quarantine is advised for travel-related reasons, we're going to ask you first to minimize your contact and minimize interactions before you even travel to campus, because that gives you the best chance at testing negative once you arrive to campus for that entry testing. And then furthermore, really limiting your action on campus and really, sort of staying in place, so to speak, so that you minimize interactions during that time of travel-related quarantine. What did I miss, Peter?
Well, Judy, that was an amazing amount of detail. And for the rest of the panelists, I hope none of you have to follow Judy the rest of today's session, because we're in trouble if we do. So I think you've described it very well, and it really does get down to the heart of the household concept. And I could certainly talk a little bit about the extended move-in process, but it seems like this question has already assessed that. So from a household process, you are going to, if with your roommates and your suite mates and your flatmates, you're going to spend the semester together. You're going to be living in your household. So it's essential that as folks are moving into campus and they're reaching out to their roommates, that household process starts before you arrive on campus. And Judy has gone into an extraordinary amount of detail about how to self-quarantine before you depart for campus, how to manage that travel to mitigate the risk. And then once you arrive on campus, how you work within your household to mitigate that risk. So while I understand there's a bit of a difference in arrival times, that's the way the household system is designed. Start working together now through the summer until you arrive, get to know your roommate. And I think, and then we've obviously provided ample time for move-in to kind of keep that process slow and deliberate as we scale up and get ready for the first day classes.
Well, you still get that question that comes up, and I know we might have covered it, but just a little bit more to break it out. I'm from a hotspot, which could be half the country by the time this starts, but I'm from a hotspot. What do I need to be thinking about in terms of my own personal quarantining? And when I say a hotspot, I'm from a hotspot in the United States, somewhere other than New England or the New England corridor, which includes New York and New Jersey.
So if you're someone who's traveling to BU from a hotspot, and as Dean Elmore indicated, that's actually a lot of the world and a lot of the US certainly. If you're coming from a hotspot, the things to do are some of those practical things that we're going to ask you to do when you're on campus here. Practice physical distancing. We're not asking you to socially distance because we actually want you to be socially close, but eliminate the possibility of being a close contact. Really remove yourselves from those interactions that put you into close contact with other people. That's first and foremost. And minimizing those interactions, saying no to the big farewell barbecue in the backyard, even if you're outside, making sure that you still physically distance and wear facial coverings. I think those are the two most important things. If you are able to travel by private car, that's ideal because traveling by public transportation just increases the number of potential exposures that you might have. But for many people, that's not going to be possible. And traveling by train or by plane is going to be the most practical thing to do. And in that case, continue to employ the use of facial coverings, wash your hands frequently, and minimize interactions. It's really boils down to those three things that you can employ when you're traveling, before you leave, and when you get here to help decrease the risk of transmission.
And the question comes up too, as we really break it out, if my roommate, it's funny, people always say my roommate, if my roommate's got a quarantine, what happens to me? What should I do? What am I going to be asked to do?
So, I think it's a really great question. And there's two concerns here, right? There's the concerns with what I do, and then there's the concerns with my roommate or someone in my household, as Peter said. And I really like that idea of this is not just something that you're doing for a point in time. So if your roommate is coming from an area that's a hotspot, their individual health practices may put them at less risk of having coronavirus than you are coming from a non-hotspot based on your own individual health practices. So I think it does come down to a lot of the individual health practices. We're not going to have people quarantining in their rooms for 35 days. The travel-related quarantine is really to minimize your contact as much as possible. If you've been in your room, your roommate moves in, remember, we will be doing testing. And that is something that I think is really important to understand and how that helps us in a quarantine state. The quarantine period is set at 14 days because approximately 98% of people who are going to develop symptoms after an exposure will do so in that 14-day period. With more frequent testing of our population, which is something that BU is rolling out, and that testing is very different than the majority of testing that has been done in the US. The testing in the US has largely been reserved for people who have symptoms, or more recently for people who are a close contact of someone who tests positive. BU will certainly be doing that sort of testing, but we're also rolling out asymptomatic or surveillance testing, which means even after you move in, students will be tested, not just students actually, our whole community will be tested with varying frequencies so that we are finding out when people have infections early, even if they don't have symptoms, and then getting them removed from people who are well. So that's an important piece to realize as well. The entrance testing will be occurring, and so that's certainly helpful, but there will also be surveillance testing that's happening as well with a pretty significant frequency. We're telling most students to expect at least weekly testing, perhaps even a little more often, and more details should be released next week about that. So that's also something that's important to know. It won't just be, well, I quarantine and then someone comes in with me and now they're quarantining. There's also active symptom attestation that's going on each day, as well as surveillance testing that's happening regularly.
Testing strategy is just as important here. Sue, if we can go to you, there's a question about Thanksgiving, whether or not there is any change to the academic calendar so that that we go remote at a certain point in time, and most people are hearing about the prospect of late November.
That's right. There have been a lot of conversations about this, both at Boston University and at other institutions, as I'm sure people are well aware. And we've had pretty robust conversations around it as well. I believe that there will be a determination and announcement very, very soon. Not sure if it'll be this week or beginning of next, but shortly. As of right now, we are maintaining the current academic calendar. So that takes us through classes through December 10th. On campus. Now, that's not to say that some students wouldn't choose to go home at Thanksgiving and remain at home. The Learn From Anywhere option does allow for this. The one thing that I would caution thinking about that is making sure that one of your classes or any of your classes aren't in person only, and if to make sure that you're in contact with your faculty to talk about the ramifications about switching to remote after Thanksgiving.
And I'm assuming, Peter, that if the academic calendar remains unchanged, the residence calendar will be the same.
That is correct, Ken, yes.
Sue, a question came in about labs. Will students run regular labs in lab rooms? Is that anticipated?
So there's been a lot of planning over the course of the spring and the summer about the return to research and what that means. Individual researchers were asked to make plans about their labs, and that includes personnel that would be involved. It would be creating protocols, how many people would be allowed in a lab, use of PPE, cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. So those things have taken place. With lab components will be run. Some labs be changed to virtual labs depending on pedagogical imperatives of the class, and some will be happening in person. As in many other places in the classrooms, we're going to de-densify those experiences, so students may not be in the lab with the frequency that they were previously. But I would say if it's researching with a faculty member, the faculty member will have put plans together for what research will look like in the fall.
And do you think that's the same with CFA studio courses and other courses like that that tend to be more lab studio based?
Absolutely. The schools and colleges have been looking carefully at the capacity of the rooms that they use for different activities, creative activities, for labs, what the capacity would be, that is with 6 foot distancing. In some cases, it's more distancing depending on activity. So we've been looking at all of those spaces. We have added technology to many spaces that perhaps didn't have it before, or the capacity for technology to accommodate the anywhere framework.
And let's see, Amanda, there are some questions here about what you think your predictions are for study abroad come spring.
Ooh, if only my crystal ball worked today, Dean Elmore. I know for study abroad, so I'm in the International Students and Scholars Office, which is under the Global Programs umbrella. There's lots of conversation going on around study abroad. As of today, study abroad is they're accepting applications for the spring, and those programs will happen as they are scheduled right now.
Okay. And I see Rebecca Casserly might be in our green room. Rebecca, can you come on in? We've got a few financial aid and aid-related questions and work questions that you might be helpful for us in. Let's see if we can get her in. Wow, that was quick. Good to see you, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us. So a few questions, if I could throw them out there for you, be great.
Okay.
We've got some folks wondering about minimum number of credits for financial aid and maybe any effects that this might have going remote or not with regard to financial aid.
Sure. So we've actually developed a really useful website, and because we're financial aid, it has calculators that are interactive. So if you go to the main BU website, type in financial aid and then just LFA, it pulls up great information. 12 credits for financial aid, that's full time. So that's what you need to be. Each semester is 12 credits.
So here's an interesting one. I haven't seen this in a while. Can a student use work study from a remote location? Can I work remotely and still use my work study portion of my financial aid?
Great question. As long as your employer has work that you can do remote and you work with your employer, yes, you can use your work study funding to work remotely. And in fact, in my office, that's our plan for the fall semester.
Wow, okay. And I think those are the biggies. So one more time, you think folks should get to that website and take a look at some of those things you put out there, right?
I think so. I've been linking families to the website. It has great information. Of course, we're always happy to talk to you. We're pretty popular as people are making their decisions. So first try the website and then reach out to my office, and we're happy to help with your decision. But we did put real interactive calculators that you can put your financial aid and see if it would make any, if it would lower, because your costs will be lower if you're doing 100% remote from home. So you want to make sure what implications that has on your financial aid, and then see what it happens to the amount due to the university.
All right. And I'll let you go back to answering some of those questions in the Q&A, but stick around. We might need to call you back in.
I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, we've got a question about shuttles and physical and everything in terms of physical distancing. How are BU shuttles going to work?
Great question. We will announce the shuttle schedule the first week of August. You will see that shuttles will, we're going to use the rear doors for entry. Masks will be required. Masks or face coverings will be required. And density. There will be density restrictions in terms of, anyone who's used the shuttle knows that the seating's pretty tight. And in the fall, if you use the shuttle in September, depending upon those peak times, those buses were packed. So Ken, we'll talk a lot about both density reductions in classrooms today, and residence halls and dining halls. The shuttle bus is really no different. And we'll talk a lot about enhanced cleaning protocols that are going to be available in common spaces, in classrooms and hallways and residence halls. That will also apply to the shuttle. Those buses will be completely sanitized after key shifts by our facilities group. And we'll ask students to use judgment. I mean, if a bus pulls up and it seems like it's full and you can't maintain what you believe is a reasonable distance for that ride, wait for the next bus. And walking will be a practical alternative on the Charles River campus in the fall.
All right, so let's go to a few of those things, Peter. Give us a sense of some of the depopulation efforts and approaches in residences. And then, Sue, I'll go to you to talk a little bit about what classrooms are going to look like. Go right ahead, Peter.
Okay. Well, Ken, I think you mentioned this at the beginning. The Campus Life Guide is a really valuable resource that students and parents can use. It talks about the density reductions that we've done in the dining halls, but I'll give you a quick synopsis. Quads and triples have been eliminated throughout our system with the exception of one dining hall. I'm sorry, with the exception of one residence hall, that's 575 Com Ave. We did not reduce that residence hall because it's 3 students to a room with an in-suite bath, which is a very low ratio for a shared bath. So that density has happened across the campus in all of the residences. We've talked a little bit about how we're managing the density and move-in, so I won't go back and revisit that. Common spaces, shared spaces within the residences will certainly, they will have reduced capacity as well. Study lounges and those shared spaces. The density will be posted on signage for outside of those rooms. So once again, we'll ask students to use judgment. There won't be someone standing outside that room to monitor if it says there should only be 4 or 6 people sharing this space at a given time. There won't be someone standing there. There are just way too many of those spaces across campus and in the residences. Please use your judgment. Look at the signage. Look at the way we're asking you to come into the building. I haven't seen this question, but if you're in a residence that's a high-rise residence, we will ask students that live on the first floor, 4 floors, to use the stairs. There will be one way up going to your residence and space, and there will be one way down. And that will help us manage the density in the elevators as well for those students who live on the upper floors. And if you live on the upper floors and you're on your way out to classes or dining, take the stairs. You're going down. Yeah, it may be a little bit inconvenient, but it'll help manage the density in the elevators as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned, before I get to you, Sue, you mentioned a couple of things in the last two questions. The notion that there will be the need for wearing a face covering or a mask on a shuttle. I'm going to assume that you'll also need to do that in public spaces, in classrooms, in hallways and corridors, even in your residences, and that really we're reserving the ability for you to not have that face covering on when you're in, say, an office by yourself or in your living space, your actual room. Does that make sense?
It does, Ken. That's absolutely correct.
And then, Judy, these notions about bathroom ratios and common spaces and some of the things that Peter mentioned, those are based upon healthcare guidance, right?
Yes, Dean Elmore. So we're trying to, as Peter mentioned, the de-densification is really something that you'll see throughout campus. At all locations. And so it's the same for looking at those common shared spaces. We're really trying to preserve that idea that we don't have enough people in this area that will cause anyone to be a close contact, right? I mean, we know people have to move about in a space, and so we're not walking around with a 6-foot bubble around us, but the less people there are in a shared space, the easier it is to be able to, move around and take care of what needs to be taken care of. So just like you might schedule times in your own house now where, this person has to be at work at this time so they get the first shower, we're encouraging students to do those same things as well as we live together in this communal situation.
And Sue, what's a classroom or labs and those sorts of things? What are they going to look like?
They will look different. I think none of us were really using the word de-densifying much before 5 or 6 months ago, and now it seems to be the watchword. But it really is. We have taken a look at all our academic spaces, our classrooms, spaces where creative activities occur, labs, things like that, to understand, per guidance that we're getting from the Commonwealth, from the City of Boston, from the CDC, what is the right size? What is the right number of people that can occupy a space? So when you walk into a classroom, it will look different. You may have had 30 seats with tablets in a room, and you may go into a classroom now, the same room, and it may have 12 seats, possibly fewer. For specific classes, you may be rotating through. That is, you would attend a class and then perhaps attend remotely for the next class, the next 2 classes. The rotation would depend on the enrollment and the capacity in the room itself. Labs, as I mentioned earlier, are also de-densified. So researchers have had to put together a plan that articulates what are the protocols, how many people can be in the space at a particular time. So things are going to look a little bit different, but the thing that will remain the same is that these are the same faculty that love to teach, the same researchers that are engaged in their activities, and they're anxious to get back into that with their students, whether it is engaging them remotely for those students who won't be returning to campus, or those who are on campus and rotating through their classes or labs.
Peter, we've got a couple of questions here as they relate to storage and also to the notion of my planning changing and needing to leave the dorms. So let's start with that. If I have to leave because for some reason, will I get any sort of refund or prorated share of my cost?
Okay, well, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the Campus Life Guide does touch on that. There's a Campus Life Advisory that is attached to the guide that is part of the residence license agreement on additional rules for COVID-19 for the 2021 academic year. And you will see on section 5 around termination that if the university terminates the agreement due to public health concerns, then we would offer credits for housing costs and dining costs that are prorated as appropriate. But those are the credits that we would offer. If you choose, and I think what we've tried to do, Dean Elmore, and for the rest of the panelists, they've heard me discuss this before, is with the academic side of the institution, what we've tried to do is create LFA so that students have options regardless of where they choose to reside. I think you're hearing about all the careful planning that's been put in place in terms of managing density from move-in, reducing density in the residence halls. We'll probably talk a little bit more about dining in today's session, but all of this has been carefully thought through and designed so that students and parents have options. In order for us to be able to plan to manage the residential hall system and dining system, we need to have an understanding of who's going to be here. So the idea of really think this through, I think you get a sense of what campus life in the fall will be like. It's a very robust experience, but we've heard repeatedly that it's going to be different than it was, but it still will be a robust in-person experience. And I think you have to make the decision as to what your comfort level is. We welcome you if you'd like to be here, but we ask you to make that commitment to be here on or before August 1st.
Now, Peter, there is the unfinished business of storage. Folks are asking, if I can't return to campus, talk to me a little bit about storage. What should I be thinking about? What should I be doing?
So when I go to sleep at night, I'm counting 39,370 boxes backwards.
Seriously?
That's how many boxes we have in storage of student belongings. If you're returning to campus and you have a residence license agreement, you will be able to pick up those items as you're moving in. They will be located if you're a continuing student and you've done this before, you know that we locate those pickup zones directly adjacent to the residences where you're going to be living. So your boxes are close to where you're going to be living, and you will be able to pick them up there. And we have locations on West Campus, Central Campus, East Campus, and South Campus for that to occur. If you do not have an RLA, then the housing office, and you did place your items in storage at the end of spring, the housing office will be sending out an email, I think by the end of the week, that gives you guidance on how to pick up your belongings prior to September 1st.
Thank you. Amanda, can you talk a little bit about borders that are closing with regard to COVID-19 and then certainly rescheduling F1 visas? And I think as a follow-on to that, the questions about who to notify with regards to changes in housing and also medical insurance comes up as well. So if you could start us off, and then we'll go to Dr. Platt maybe to talk a little bit about insurance.
Sure, this has been a really challenging, really confusing time for our international students. We have For the spring semester and for summer, for those of you who were enrolled previously, we were given a lot of flexibility. So students can take classes remotely, they could go home, they could go to their home country, they could stay with friends or family in a different part of the US. And as long as you made normal academic progress in your degree program and you continued to be enrolled, we were able to keep your immigration record open, your SEVIS record. We have, in the last 2.5 weeks, there's been a lot of confusion. ICE gave us, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency on July 6th gave us some really restrictive guidance for the fall that helped clarify some things that we weren't sure of, but it also was significantly more restrictive and was going to cause real hardships for many students around the country. So court battles ensued. They ended up rescinding that guidance midweek last week. But we are left for our international students with lots of questions. So for our continuing students, we know more than we know for our incoming students. So continuing students, those same rules that we had to follow for spring and summer should apply. You should enroll full-time, whether you're doing that from returning to Boston and coming to the in-person, coming to class when you can in those rotations. That's fine. If you're home in your home country in China, you can enroll remotely. We will keep your record open. So enroll full-time and continue to make progress in your degree. You should be fine. From an immigration perspective. For our new students, those students who are hoping to matriculate in the fall, we have fewer answers for you. I saw in the Q&A, someone actually posted the language from the ICE guidance, which I love. I love people who go to websites and read government stuff. But it's really confusing because we are still trying to determine if the hybrid learn from anywhere format will allow us to bring brand new students into the country. We do believe that it will. We are working on the logistics of that. We're trying to be as flexible as possible in terms of when people can arrive, because we know there's lots of travel restrictions in place. Most of the embassies and consulates around the world have been closed since March. The great news is we are starting to hear that those embassies are starting to open up. We heard, especially in Europe, it's done on a case-by-case basis based on what's going on in the country. So you're going to go check the website of the embassy where you would apply for your visa and see what they are doing. I would suggest, if you need to schedule an F1 visa appointment, go ahead and follow the instructions on the website to schedule that. And then you're going to follow the instructions to request an emergency appointment. There is a chance you'll be able to get one of those and still be able to enter the US before September 2nd. We do know that some of you are in countries where there are travel restrictions, where you're going to have a really difficult time actually flying to the US. I would encourage you to pay attention to our news. We have a news section of the ISSO website, bu.edu/ISSO. We're updating that really regularly as we learn new things. Things are changing almost on a daily basis in terms of travel restrictions and embassy openings. So we know we're going to update our website. That's the best way to find new information. And then we also are, we're working remotely, so you can contact ISSO if you have questions as well. We're a little bit slower than we want to be right now to respond because we've had such huge traffic with all of our questions. But we know that things are slowly improving. So I think there is hope that many of you will be able to get here for the fall semester.
Thank you. And Dr. Platt, the issue comes up about insurance, but also things like quarantine, isolation, the medical care that you mentioned. Are all those insured? Do I have to pay extra for them? And are they available to a student who lives off campus?
So great questions. And I really appreciate the first set of questions going to Amanda, so I could post something in the chat as well. That is the Student Health Services webpage dedicated to student health insurance, and also our health insurance guide, which has been emailed to all of our students, all of our incoming students, as part of this campaign to get people thinking about health insurance and making an informed decision. And certainly this year is a really nuanced year for a variety of reasons, as everyone knows, and particularly for the student health insurance plan. So just to back up about insurance, to level set, in terms of health insurance, all students who study in Massachusetts are required to have coverage that will meet the Affordable Care Act requirements. And we have information in the Student Health Insurance Guide that will educate anyone about what those requirements are. And so because of that requirement, BU chooses to automatically enroll any student who is 3/4 time and above in the student health insurance plan. Students are able to waive that insurance, but I really encourage you, if you look at nothing else on the insurance guide, go to the pages that show out the examples of actual students to see if your coverage will provide comprehensive coverage and how it stacks up to the student health insurance plan. So that's specifically about the student health insurance plan. Speaking more broadly about insurance carriers, at least most insurance carriers in the United States, COVID-related testing when it's medically indicated, as well as hospitalizations or more advanced care for COVID is covered, and that's also covered as part of the student health insurance plan. But the measures that we're talking about as BU works to mitigate the risk of COVID on campus related to surveillance or asymptomatic testing and quarantine or isolation housing and having medical professionals check on you, whether you're on campus or off campus. If you're part of our community, our BU health professionals are reaching out to you to provide education, advice, and information. That is not something that is an extra charge. That is part of how BU is addressing this significant health challenge for all of our students and our community as well. So there are not additional costs or costs that will be billed to your insurance if, for example, you have to move to quarantine housing or move to isolation housing.
And that is different housing than what I would be assigned to live in, right?
That's right. For residential students who are on campus who either are identified as a close contact and need quarantine housing, or who are identified as a positive case and need isolation housing, we will work with Residence Life and Housing, and we've been doing this on a very small scale, even over the summer. We'll work to get students into designated quarantine and isolation housing here on campus.
Planning for a scale up as a part of that. Now, let me ask you this a bit, Dr. Platt. You mentioned a little bit of this, but are students living off campus going to be tested as frequently as students living on campus? And then the second part of that, as you speak about things like quarantining and anything else, if a student tests positive who lives off campus, is there any additional involvement the university would have? You spoke about on-campus students. What about an off-campus student?
So when we talk about testing frequency, there are, as everyone can imagine, a lot of planning and decision making going into this. And we have not released the official testing frequency, but there are plans to test off-campus students frequently as well. We know our population mingles. It's not as if people do not, not as if there's, a gate around the campus. We've got a very porous campus. It's one of the great things about BU's campus. So we know that it's important to be able to test people not only who are on campus, but off campus as well. And again, this applies not just to students. We're looking at our whole community here, faculty, staff, and students. Now, in the specific example of a student who may be off campus, who gets testing done here at BU, and that testing shows that they have a COVID, we will have BU health professionals who will actually inform you of that result, and then we'll give you information. We'll talk to you about your options. Whether you're on campus or off campus, if you're able to go home by a private car, that's often something that many of our students prefer to do. It's a little easier sometimes than staying on campus or even staying in an off-campus apartment. So we'll provide you with information. We'll help you think through what is best to do. And then if you're in a situation off campus where you've got a lot of roommates and you're not really able to quarantine with the private room and private bathroom, which is something I think that will certainly happen, then we'll give you advice on how you can safely do that. And that's going to involve, again, frequent hand washing, wearing your facial covering at all times, cleaning down the surfaces that you frequently touch and use, and minimizing contact as much as possible.
All right. Provost Kennedy, I got a few for you if I can throw a few at you here.
Absolutely.
If I'm going remote, how will finals work for me?
And that will will really depend on the individual class. Again, faculty are thinking about assessment over the course of the semester because we know that we'll have students that will be taking classes wholly remotely. So that is something that's very much on folks' mind. You know, and it may be the case that many finals are remote simply because we've got a lot of students, and if a lot of students are on campus, we have to make sure they can be spread apart to take those finals. So we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about you know, what sort of guidance should be in place and proctoring should be in place for that. But we will make sure that that is available for any student that is taking a class remotely or who determines that they want to switch to a remote modality at some point across the course of the semester.
You know, the popular question too is, when are we going to know which classes are remote and which classes are not?
We are working on that. And I know that that feels like a very unsatisfactory answer. I believe some schools and colleges are very, very close, and they will be communicating with their students about the modalities of their courses. And I don't mean to, you know, use the term modality all over the place, but just to let folks know, the default is the Learn from Anywhere framework. And that is that you can be in person and rotate through remotely, or you can be wholly remotely. So that is the default expectation for most classes. There are some classes that will be wholly in person because there's a specific skill that's being acquired in that class. I know that the College of Communication has already let some students know about the series of courses that will be wholly in person, and that other schools and colleges are in the process of doing that. At this point, it's probably more a question about which courses will be wholly remote. And again, we're in the midst of working through that, looking at the schedule, determining when there is a high enough number of rotations that, you know, for the sake of sound pedagogy, we would move a class to remote delivery. So that information will be coming, and I realize we are asking you to be patient. There's a lot of information that still needs to come, but the schools and colleges will be communicating with students.
And will there be LFA in the spring?
We will be prepared to LFA in the spring. Again, I think we'll need to make it through the fall and understand what the guidance is, what is coming from the CDC, from the Commonwealth, and from the city as to our obligations around things like physical distancing, face coverings, things like that, and whether or not we are able to return to what we have seen before. But we're prepared to LFA. The technology is in place. The faculty are preparing for it. So we'll be ready to go if that's what we need to do.
And that goes for any metrics. Another question we get is, what are the metrics that we're going to use to, if we have to go total remote? And it's the same sort of thing. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
That we've got to wait and see.
Exactly. We need outside guidance, and we need to see what's happening on our campus as well.
And Peter, a question that comes up is, in the event that we think that we've got to make a big change like this, what happens to me if I'm living on campus? Will we have any measure of compassion or anything of that sort that will be workable?
We have any measure of compassion, of course. I think that just goes without saying of everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. So can we be a little bit specific? Are we talking about a housing issue, yes, or a dining issue?
Yeah, will I be thrown out on the streets and told that I've just got to go?
Well, I hope that's not the case, but you know, I think that and we've already gone through a process where we've experienced this in the spring in short order, and you know, we learned a lot through that process. Some things we got really right, and some things we needed to work on. So we've learned a lot through that process. We'll apply that learning. You know, I think what it falls back to is we've heard Dr. Platt talk about the testing protocols that are going to be in place, both on an ongoing basis and entry-level testing. We've talked about the dedensification of the campus, both in the residence halls and the classrooms and the learning options. I mean, there are building blocks in place that allow us to manage this with the cooperation of the student body who have returned to campus, and that using that good judgment in terms of the kind of practices that we talked about before. So we will be prepared if that occurs. I hope it doesn't. You know, I think as we've learned through the storage piece, obviously when you return to campus, clearly bring the things that you need, the essential items that you need. to make your residents comfortable, that you can manage as we go into the beginning of a New England winter or fall, which is a beautiful time of year in New England. But bring the things that you need, but please don't bring a U-Haul.
All right. And how can I find out who else is going to be in my household? That's a question I've seen.
Well, you know, so creating a household is really no different than a traditional fall. You know, obviously you have suite mates, you have residences where you live on a floor and you share some common spaces. So working with residence life housing, you know, creating these small communities, we've done a lot of the work by de-densifying the quads and triples that I mentioned earlier. So a household will consist of, if you're in 33 Aganis Way and you're in an 8-person suite, those 8 people will be your household. If you're in 10 Buick Street, those 4 people will be in your household. If you're in Miles Standish Hall, those 4 people in a 4-person suite or an 8-person suite in Miles Standish Hall will be part of your household. If you're in a first-year residence like Warren Towers and West Campus, those households are going to a floor will be divided into 3 or 4 households of anywhere from 10 to 12 or 13 students. And those groups of students will work together just as they did before. This will be a little bit more organized around access for daily hygiene visits to bathrooms and how we manage the facilities schedule to go into these bathrooms and do enhanced cleaning between those uses. And then the kind of materials that we provided to students so that they can clean. There will be disinfecting wipes in all the common shared bathrooms. And we would encourage students to wipe down a surface before you use it. And certainly as you're leaving, to wipe down that surface. So you're leaving it in a condition that you would like to find it in. Does that answer the question?
I think so. You know, earlier, Peter, you mentioned, and a couple of times you've mentioned good judgment. I think that's an important piece for us to start to wrap up. There are questions here about enforcement. How are we going to enforce this? How are we going to make sure that people are following this, especially as it pertains to things like face coverings and respecting physical distancing? So let me just say a word, and feel free to chime in if anybody would like to. I think that there are some real discrete things that we've got to be mindful of here. Let me talk first about some of the non-negotiables that will have systems in place to fully monitor, or to monitor in some way that it makes sense for our enforcement. When it comes to testing, as you've heard about, and when it comes to attesting to your symptoms on a daily basis, whether you live on or off campus, we will have mechanisms where we'll know whether or not you've done that, and we'll be able to have people follow up with you, or ways to follow up with you without compromising your privacy in the process of doing that. That is easy, or easier, I'll say. The other piece is that we know, and we will have a way to monitor whether or not someone's following the basic rules that we have in place for staying isolated in the event of needing to do that on campus, or on campus in the event of being quarantined. We have ways of monitoring that, and we've dealt with that. Again, systems in place for that. Here's the hard part, and here's the part where everybody's going to have to play a role in this, not just me, not just the people that you see on the screen, but everyone. We are going to have some conflicts with each other. I'm here to tell you that right now. And I know everybody means well, but people have got to use that judgment that Peter just spoke about a couple of times. You're going to have to use your good judgment to say to a classmate, a friend, someone who may be walking past you, pull your face cover up over your nose and your mouth and your chin. It doesn't work if it's around your neck. We've got to say that to each other, as opposed to let me call the police or report you as a part of it. We can handle that a little differently. We can handle dealing with physical distancing, and we're going to have to make sure that we monitor each other and are mindful with each other. We are going to have to say to ourselves, there's a posted number of people who are supposed to be on the shuttle bus or in this room that I'm about to go into. And sometimes it might be a restroom, bathroom, or a lounge of some sort. You've got to use your judgment about doing that. And I will say this too, you've got to use your judgment, not just on campus. And there are a lot of nudges who are on campus, a lot of people who will be walking around and giving reminders. In fact, you might see some of these very people on the screen who'll give you reminders. Hard part's going to be for you and for me when I'm not around a bunch of people nudging me. when I've got to be in a space where I don't know as many people, maybe some strangers, or maybe a place where I don't live, where I've got to be a lot more mindful about doing the same sorts of things. Massachusetts, and I'm here to tell you, I've been in Massachusetts all this time. There's a real culture here of people being pretty nudgy out on the streets around here to keep those face coverings up, to make sure you're not crowding in spaces, to make sure that you wipe things off and wipe your hands and do all those sorts of things. I do think that there's a culture in this state, and they want to make sure that you coming in and coming back to Boston University, that you're still abiding by those. So enforcement's going to be, and I don't like enforcement, I'll be honest with you. I think it's more about how we look after each other, how we take care of ourselves, and how in taking care of ourselves, we're going to take care of each other. We all have to just be thoughtful. Like I said, testing, quarantining, isolating, attesting every day. We've got a lot of ways that we're going to be real on top of people about that. The other human interactions that happen out there, the things that you're probably used to doing already in many places, you're just going to have to be diligent amongst yourself and yourselves about that sort of thing. We still will, if need be, if I get a report about a chronic circumstance where someone just refuses to wear a face covering in class, someone refuses to keep a face covering on or respects physical distancing in a lounge space or another public space, then I will ask you to go remote and not be on the campus because you've made a decision that that's not what you want to do. So that will be the ultimate enforcement, that we ask you not to physically be in the community. I don't think we need to get there. I hope that we will respect each other enough to do those sorts of things, and probably to remind each other. There are many days when I forget my face covering and I got to run back home or go and find one. That will happen, but I hope that we can be kind to each other and understanding with each other, but also very firm with each other about the need to take care of that. I don't know if any of you will add anything.
Well said, Dean Elmore. I think above all else, cooperation among all of us will naturally lead to compliance, and doesn't mean we need enforcement unless it's absolutely required. Cooperation and good judgment, and we're all going to be there to help.
Different effects on people, but this is one of those rare times where, you know, whether you believe it or not, we are in this together, and we're going to have to look after each other. And understanding especially that there might be differing effects on different people with that regard. All right, so what I want to do is go around really fast, and I'm going to ask each one of you what might be a question we didn't get to, or something that you're hearing most often that you think we got to make sure you give a quick answer to. Peter, let's start with you.
Well, I think a lot of questions revolve around housing. And if a student decides to defer in the fall and do LFA in the fall, what are their options for spring housing? And certainly, please look at your RLA, make that determination. If you decide that you're going to do remote learning in the fall, on November 1st, we will open our spring housing room selection and assignment process, and we would encourage you to return then if you're comfortable returning in the spring at that point in time. There's a process for us to use to do that, and we would welcome you. While we can't guarantee the room assignment that you had in the fall will be available, if it is and it's available, then we'll work with you on that room assignment. If it's not, we will do everything we reasonably can to help you find a suitable room assignment and pair you with the roommate.
Sounds like reasonable flexibility there. Amanda.
One of the primary things we're hearing is not so much specific questions. We have a lot of case specific questions. Can I get here? Is my document valid? But this general feeling of confusion and lack of clarity. And I think you guys have heard from all of us that I think you've seen, hopefully on this panel, there is a dedicated group of people who are trying to figure out answers to all of these really complicated, really nuanced questions to make this a success in the fall. So I think our students are, you guys are feeling frustrated that we don't have all of the answers for you. I know, especially for our international students, we are learning something new every single day. Things are changing a little bit. So I would strongly encourage you to pay attention to information you're receiving from our office over the next 6 weeks or so. We're going to send out updates via email. We're going to be updating our website. We're trying really, really hard to make sure that you have the most accurate and up-to-date information when things are changing incredibly quickly. So we appreciate your patience. We appreciate your understanding of the fact that we are all trying to figure out this very challenging situation together. But we are excited to have you back. We hope we're going to be able to get as many of you back into the country as possible. And we hope to see you on the campus in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Dr. Platt.
I think a good deal of questions have come up, but I want to just mention that one question that we do often get is, what about the other services that Student Health Services offers, like primary care, behavioral medicine, mental health services? All of our offices within primary care will be open. If anything, COVID-19 has really pushed healthcare in general to be able to deliver more services remotely than ever before. So please just reach out to us, whether it's symptom attestations or regular testing. We're going to be reaching you through Patient Connect, which is the app that many of you know to schedule appointments, but also where you upload your incoming information, health and immunization information. So please go to Patient Connect, and remember that we still will have other services throughout the fall that are not related to COVID.
Thank you. And Provost Kennedy.
I think that just to reiterate, the question tends to be when, and we are getting there. It's a big puzzle that we're putting together, and to echo what I think what all the panelists have said, we're working hard on it. I think that you will start getting communication. I know you will start getting communication very soon from the colleges and schools, all the undergraduate programs, about what the fall semester will look like. That may come centrally from a dean's office. It may come from individual faculty to talk about their courses, but you will start getting information very soon, because we're close to figuring out what all the courses are going to look like.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you all being here, and we've got one more of these this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be joined by folks from Wheelock College of Education and Human Development, the School of Hospitality Administration, and the College of Fine Arts. I also want to say thank you to student government, and so what I want to do is to push you all out of this room, and I'm going to have David Joseph from the student government come on in. Hey, David.
How you doing? How you doing?
All right, how you doing? Where are you in the world right now?
Currently, I'm actually right next to BU. I'm on Comm Ave, so I'm like 5-minute walk right next to BU.
There we go. So I appreciate the student government being involved in this, and I want to see if you can talk to us about the New Normal Challenge.
Sure thing. So first off, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I just want to give credit for the New Normal Challenge to the Dean of Students Office, as well as Umoja, the Black Student Union, as well as Innovative BU. And StuGov, we've all partnered together to work on this challenge that can provide students the means to actually implement their idea on campus as they come back. So whether it's an idea of changing the way of life, changing or like innovating something new or bringing something new to the table, we're looking to hear every single opinion. So you can submit your ideas via 2 different tracks. And I recommend to take a look at the website, which will be posted after this. And you can look for more information. You can look for details on specific deadlines, just so students have a way to actually change and benefit their community that surrounds them here at BU.
That sounds pretty cool. Thank you, David, for doing this and for student government having that real innovative mindset to work through some of these. I hope folks will take advantage of that. And I hope that you hear from everyone that we are working real hard here. We're working off of government directives and public health guidance as well. And that the real goal here is to make sure that we welcome you in a few short weeks right back here and show people how you can live and manage in this pandemic. We'll be here with open arms. We can't hug you, but we certainly will have the sentiment out there for you. And I say, and feel free to join us as well. I'll remind you that the 8 other sessions that we have done previously will be available because they were recorded, and you'll be able to take a look at those. And we've got one more this evening starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So all the best to us all. I look forward to seeing you in a few short weeks, whether it be remotely or live. And let's hope for some manifestations of global health, of justice, I'll say racial justice too, and certainly manifestations of peace. Be well.